an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 4, Episode 13. No better to be safe than sorry. In this episode, there is a major death in this episode. And for once, I do not think this person is simply going to come back next season. I think. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. Michael also commissioned a live watch, and this was the only live watch that has ever been commissioned for The Magicians, and now I really understand why that was the one. I don't know where to start talking about this, because I'm just gonna start about where I feel like, because guess what? I'm the boss. So, hi. This was really well done. I am impressed. I feel like The Magicians really stepped up its game this season, and especially the second half of this season. I feel like they really did a nice job laying a bunch of groundwork for what they did this episode that feels intentional, because there are times where shows or books will try and make it look like they laid groundwork or like they planned something. And while you want to give them the credit for that, you have a sneaking suspicion that that was not done on purpose. If you guys know what I'm talking about, that maybe it was accidental or something just happened to come together and it all works as a unit, but you feel like maybe that wasn't like on purpose. And this episode really, it's clear they knew what they were going to do at the beginning of the season. This was not some fucking, we're putting these episodes in different orders at the last second. We're changing up what we're going to have as major plot points at the last second. We have a lot of callbacks to earlier lines, moments, implications that all add up to this was meant to happen all along. I want to ask a question, and I'm not sure who knows the answer to this, but there is a point at which, and I can't remember when this is. I feel like this is the beginning of this season. Was there a scene where Alice is reading Quentin's book and it says that he's going to die in 2 weeks? Was that a thing? I know, I feel like it was mentioned that Quentin was going to die, and we just all, I'm sure most of us were like, okay, well, that's not happening. So how are we getting out of this one? That's 100% my attitude. And the thing is, and I've said this before with other seasons, it's really hard to care when a character dies on a show where people die and come back all the time. And what I really appreciated about this was that they go out of their way to really show us that Quentin is moving on. They really want us to be aware that this is not something that has like a back door to it, that we can fix it or undo it the way that with Alice, you know, she looked like she died, but really she had become a Niffin. He could get her back and make her a human again. With Penny, yes, he's actually dead, but he had been around a minute and it looked like he could come back from that. And now we have a different Penny so it feels kind of like Penny is still around. There are just a lot of ways that you can undo this sort of thing in fantasy. And so it starts to be a little bit uninteresting when people are at risk because you don't even really believe that if they are killed, that is going to stick. And it's a danger, it's a really like, this is actually some of my problem with like Song of Ice and Fire is George R. R. Martin has really gotten this reputation as being totally unafraid to kill characters, but he kills major characters in like the first 2 books and then he pulls way back and people start coming back. And then the tension begins to really, really dissipate. So they make sure to show us Quentin arriving in the underworld, having the whole talk with Penny. We see a memorial that his friends hold for him. We have the really brutal line, "Did I do something brave to save my friends, or did I finally find a way to kill myself?" Which is one of the more stab to the heart lines of dialogue that this show has ever written. It was a real moment. Like, I did not cry watching this, but I teared up a lot when he said that, because that felt super duper real to me. And the fact that they showed all of this and have him take his underworld Metro card and get on that fucking train and head out, I am confident that is the end of anything we're going to see with Quentin, barring some flashbacks. If I'm wrong, I will be hugely disappointed. I will just be very, very bummed if all of a sudden he turns out to, be back somehow on season 5. But, we'll see. And he may, like, because we know that there's Quentins from other, worlds or timelines. Maybe there's a Quentin from another timeline, like they did with Penny. But the show doesn't seem to really love doing the exact same thing over again. So I don't think they'll go to the same well for Quentin that they would for Penny. And it just feels very different here, the way that they have committed to saying goodbye, that it feels really final. And I think this is a super brave move. And I said this in the live watch, that I really do think that Quentin started to become the least interesting character. There were so many compelling things going on in terms of plot, in terms of character development with other people. Alice is the one that I have liked the least, because I think I just don't really like the actress that much. And the way that they're choosing to sort of characterize her has been weird and feels a little bit stuck. But maybe Quentin's death will give her some momentum forward. I'm basically saying maybe they fridged Quentin, but I don't really mean that, because fridging implies that the only point of somebody's death is to motivate a different character. And that's clearly not what's going on here. Quentin's death is meant to be a much bigger deal than just anything going on with Alice. And I just really appreciated that there isn't this Elliot and him had this moment where it seemed pretty clear that they were looking at genuinely pursuing a romantic relationship. And Quentin wound up deciding to rekindle things with Alice, which is fine. But I was super, super interested in the two of them together, him and Elliot. And it's gonna be hard to watch, I think, what goes on with Elliot after all of this, because it could go one of two ways. Elliot is riddled with grief and guilt because of Quentin's death and cannot seem to pull himself back together and maybe falls down the addiction hole again. Or Elliot feels so burdened in a way, and I that has a negative connotation, but I don't really, maybe pressured is a better word. Maybe because of Quentin's sacrifice, Elliot begins to feel more pressure to be better and do better and really make use of the time that he was given because Quentin sacrificed himself in order to save him. And there is something really poignant and beautiful about Quentin having left that mark on Elliot and not actually getting to say goodbye or have a moment after Elliot was saved where they can connect at all. Elliot is, smashed with that axe, in terrible pain, rushed to the hospital wing, and throughout all of that, Quentin is frantically doing his magic in order to lock up the bottle that the monster is trapped in. Quentin doesn't get a moment with Elliot at all. And if there is anything that romantically in a story really pulls at me, it's totally unrequited love. A love that is there and the characters are never allowed to pursue for whatever reason. And I do not mean characters that love each other and have fucking drama between the two of them. I mean that they have responsibilities or they have legitimate barriers that they are not able to get past. It's more than just your family and my family hate each other and this can never be. I mean, it will never happen. And they both know. Not only will it never, it can never. And they are each aware of how the other feels, and they know that that is there between them, but they can do nothing about it. And that kills me in the heart. So the two of them having this, for me, they were way more interesting than Quentin and Alice. And having it happen between the two of them, that one of them gets taken away, that's rough, man. I could see some people feeling a little bit like this is a killing your gay, trope. Obviously Quentin's bi, he's not gay, but nevertheless, that Elliot really lost a partner. However, we already had Katie lose a partner, and Alice is losing a partner. So there's a part of me that feels like this show is not shy about people losing their significant others, no matter what sexuality they are. So I could see that being a problem for some people, but personally, I don't feel like that's what's going on here. Austin says, I remember seeing that complaint. Plus he's a character with mental illness. That pissed some people off. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that again, I don't feel like anybody on this show doesn't have mental illness. Whether it's the kind of dramatic hospitalized mental illness that Quentin had, maybe not, but nobody on this show is doing super well. And this episode, we see Katie considering just letting herself die because she just feels sort of what's the point? And Elliot has nearly killed himself a few times with his drug usage and binging and everything. Granted, Elliot is a gay character. Well, is he bi? I don't really know if we know for sure. I would say Elliot's probably pansexual. But he probably tends more towards liking the dudes. Anyway, that in particular, I feel is going to be really riddled with potential and problems. So we'll see how they handle what goes on with Elliot. Michael says P40 is pretty well adjusted, though. He just had to die first. Yeah, that's the thing. He doesn't count because he's dead already. So, when you kill a character that, when people are talking about the deaths of characters being based on things that are, sort of stigmatized, he's already dead. So he doesn't even really factor in, I don't feel. And he's become much more of a narrator on this show than a real character anymore. I'm not honestly a huge fan of well-adjusted, calm, incisive Penny from the underworld. There's something about the way he speaks as this version of himself that feels really pretentious in a sort of like life coach TED Talk sort of way that irritates me. And I don't know if that's like the actor or if that was the way he was directed or what. But I'm very glad that there is a 23 that feels more normal for me to fall back on. Otherwise, I feel like I would just really not have great memories of Penny due to his underworld self feeling a little bit sort of, I don't know. The one time that I thought was all right was him actually taking Quentin to see his own memorial. And I thought he did well there. But when he says something like, your life is revealed, but the only way it means anything is if it's revealed to yourself. And I was like, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. There are moments in this episode that did not work for me in that regard. But overall, the episode as a whole worked really, really well. So we start off right where the previous episode left off, in the hallways of the library, like prison system, basically. And we have Quentin distracting Monster Julia as she is about to attack the dean. And they really are able to take down Monster Julia really quickly. I did not expect this to like fucking go down within the first 3 minutes of the episode. It was a little, I won't even say it was anticlimactic because it wasn't. I knew that if they took her out this quickly, then this episode was going to be focused on something very different than what I thought, which actually made me very excited. Once I realized that they had like handled her, spoilers for Endgame, the Marvel movie, but it's sort of like when you're watching Endgame and we just see Thanos get beheaded in the first like 10 minutes of the movie. And you're just like, wait, it's been 10 minutes. This says this is a 2 hour and 40-minute movie. What just happened? I remember I was like sitting next to Owen in the theater and he blurted out, "It's been 10 minutes." And the whole theater just burst out laughing because it was like opening night and nobody knew what was going to happen. So yeah, they get her to the hospital, but she is not doing super well. And this leads to Penny having to make a decision on whether or not she is going to be a human or be a goddess, because if she stays in this sort of weird in-between state, she is simply going to continue to experience this wound like this with extreme pain over and over again forever, pretty much. And this is the one thing that I totally get her being angry at him and not really having anywhere to direct it. But I was a little bit frustrated at the fact that Julia yells at Penny for taking this decision away from her when she was not capable of making it. Like, I get that she knows that, and it's just the fact of the matter. And she has, like I said, nowhere to direct her rage about this. So she's laying it on Penny. But he was just in an impossible position. And I was honestly pretty surprised that they decided to go with human. I thought that, and by they, I mean the writers, like I kind of thought maybe they would go with goddess and do something really wild for the final season. But it makes a lot of sense if they're going to take Q out of the equation that they don't want to also take Julia out, because these two were like OGs, and Julia dealing with the loss of Quentin, but also dealing with suddenly actually being a goddess and like her immortality after he just died. I think that would be a lot. So when I step back and look at everything, picking mortality for her, that makes as much sense as anything, honestly. And I really love that after she kind of bites his head off about it, he starts to leave, and then she tells him, come back and sit here and let me be pissed at you. And he says, I can do that. And I really liked that moment because, like, that is a thing. When I first started dating Owen doesn't have a lot of relationship experience. And he had never lived with a significant other before I moved in with him. And we had a talk one time about his fears that I would, like, get tired of him, or that I would get really angry or frustrated with him over things. And I said something like, you need to be ready for that. I'm gonna get mad at you. I'm gonna get frustrated with you. I'm gonna get irritated. You are also going to get those things about me. That's how this works. You just cope with that, you know? And he had this mentality of doing everything he could to avoid doing anything that would make me angry at him. And I just had to be like, sweetie, you can't live your life like that. That's not healthy. That's you being, like, constantly afraid, which I don't want to be with somebody who's, like, afraid of me in that way. And also learning how to deal with the fact that we each are going to be unhappy with one another occasionally is how you learn to be happy. Learning how to be unhappy is the same as learning how to be happy. And so this moment of just, like, come here and let me be mad at you. I feel like so many people, when they get into a fight with their spouse or even a close friend, there's this instinct to, like, fix it and go back to not being angry. And I understand that impulse, but you've got to get through it. You can't just skip it, you know? So, and by the end of things, they have the return of her magic, because that's really the thing that's fucked up Julia. Isn't even that she's mortal now. It's the fact that it appears that she is mortal and does not have any magic. And it's an odd thing because it's suggested in the script when Underworld Penny is talking to Quentin. He says basically, like, magic comes from pain, and that Julia has been, you know, too much at peace. And when Quentin says, and magic comes from pain, we see her, like, sobbing over the loss of Quentin. And that is what seems to trigger her magic coming back. But, like, she was in a lot of pain over the loss of magic and over, like, everything that had happened. I would have thought that would be enough. I guess Quentin, like, the loss of him is so much more acute and extreme that was, you know, enough to force this out of her. But it's a pretty great moment. They have her, like, with the deck of cards, because he always used to do card tricks. And that was one of the things I liked this episode, was, like, each of them having an item that reminds them of Quentin. And her item is the deck of cards. Alice's is the mug that he fixed, just like the previous episode, I think. And Elliot has the peach. I feel like I can't remember what it was that Katie had. But anyway, she tosses the cards. Oh, that's right. Thank you, Michael. The book that Plover signed, which honestly, burn that fucking thing. Whether or not it's in memoriam, fucking burn it. But she goes to toss the cards, and they all just stop in midair. And I loved so much about the way this was done. I loved how quiet it was. When she throws the cards and they stop midair, there's no crescendo of music. There's no crash of cymbals. There's no, you know, there's no huge sting that is supposed to make us realize what a moment this is. It just is this huge moment by itself. It does not need any of that crap to tell us how she is feeling. And then her response to seeing it all floating is, Q, are you doing this? which is so great. It like Julia is so real to me in that moment because she is the kind of person who would rather believe that maybe the ghost of her friend is around messing with her than let herself get her hopes up that her magic has come back. And I just fucking relatable, man. I am the same way. I will get an inkling of hope about a thing and then immediately try and crush it with rationality and logic and all of that. It's a defense mechanism. It's a way of protecting yourself from potential disappointment. And when she realizes that it's her and she begins to spin it, it's just this beautiful moment. And I really liked Penny being there to see it. I didn't love Penny being like, yeah, you've got it back. So now what are you going to do with it? Because I was like, Penny, just give her a second, buddy, before you start handing out assignments or, putting huge pressure on her or whatever. Just let her enjoy the fact that this just happened. But they have to give, the final episode a moment of just like the potential for next season. All right. I'm trying to see, make sure that, oh my God, I forgot about the scene in which they are deciding what to do about Julia, that Penny called in the binder, and he calls the doctor a spinster nurse, to which she replies, I run this hospital book. And I fucking died. That was such a good line. And her delivery of it is so good. And then he says something about how she's like a strident woman. And I was like, oh, fuck. I remember the word strident being thrown around when I was in theater school. And it was like one of the most insulting things that you could say to a female actor. Like, nothing worse than being called loud. These bitches today get too goddamn mouthy. Am I right? I'm realizing, though, that part of the deal was that they were supposed to burn the binder so that he could not be used again. We don't see that this episode, do we? Do we see the binder get burned up? Because I feel like that didn't happen yet. I wonder if he's going to be in the next season. Because, when it comes down to it, we don't know that these two monsters are, really gone. We got instructions from some CPA working for the old gods that didn't seem super interested. I'm not convinced they're gone. And I feel like dealing with the old gods is really a good final season move to make. But we'll get there. Okay, so oh, right. I forgot about how Katie is, she is talking to Pete. Guys, I swear to God, and I know I said this during the Crowdcast, but the tattoo that Pete has and the angle that they film it from, it looked so much like a really basic, cartoon dick Sharpie drawing. I swear I got so confused in that scene. I was like, what did they do? Is somebody fucking with him? And then I realized that was meant to be the symbol for, keeping the magic, keeping him from being able to perform the magic because of it being dangerous. So yeah, we have him talking to Katie and her saying that the fact that she just wanted to be Penny's girlfriend and that makes her so weak. And I loved his response of how she can die when less people need her, fewer people need her. Sorry, Stannis. So yeah, I really, really liked this moment because Katie is allowed to feel sorry for herself here and there, but she does need somebody to snap her the fuck out of it and remind her where her fucking priorities need to be right now. So I am 100% here for this. So we have Margot and Josh. First of all, I know that it's a trope that people being sweaty is sexy. maybe that works occasionally. There have been some times, I fancy, when I have seen a sweaty man and been like, what's up? Most of the time, though, sweat does not look good. And I know with Josh, it's not sweat. It's supposed to be that he was just a fish and he was literally immersed in water and now he's not. But he looks so damp, and I just really hated that he dropped that towel. I really wanted him to please wipe down, sir, please, first. But there is a touching scene between him and Margot where Margot basically tells him that she loves him without saying it. I mean, she says it, but she doesn't just say, I love you. She tells him she will do a lot for people that she loves and that he better be ready because she is not nice or easy when she's in love, which, like, relatable. And of course, they had just started making out when Penny shows up and ruins the moment. And I was a little confused for a second about why Margot looks so immediately like she wants to murder Penny. And then I realized that it's because she thinks that Penny did exactly what she suspected he would do, which is prioritize saving Julia over saving Elliot. And it's unfair. We know, and he even says, you don't even know what the hell was going on over there. So she is leaping to conclusions, but it's because she is super anxious and she lashes out when she is anxious and upset. She does not know how to express a range of emotions. She expresses anger. That's what she do. And everything manifests as being angry, whether it makes sense and is fair or not. And I really appreciated later on when she's like kind of bites off Josh's head and walks away. And Quentin asks what that was about. And Josh says she's pissed and she's also feeling guilty for being pissed. So she's going to go walk away and then come back later and try and pretend it never happened because she's not good at apologizing. That feels very real. I am not that way. I have a hard time apologizing sometimes because I realize that I have done damage that I can't undo, and I know that the apology is not going to be enough. But I am a person who really likes to talk through things. So as much as I have a terrible temper, and as much as I have plenty of things to apologize for, my issue is not that I only lash out and then try and pretend it didn't happen at all. The idea of coming back and trying to behave as if something didn't happen, that just sounds like hugely stressful to me. So count me out. But the fact that Josh understands her so well is very helpful because it sort of, cuts to the core of the issue and helps move things along a little bit. The only thing is, we need to be sure, and by we, I mean you, the writers, who are out here definitely listening to this podcast along with millions of others. I want to make sure that the relationship between Margot and Josh does not simply become Josh does tons of emotional labor because Margot is too stunted to work on her own shit. Because that is very easily what something like this could turn into. And we could, I have seen shows where that sort of unevenness in a relationship is treated as sort of like charming. It sort of reminds me, and this is a weird comparison to make, but it's the first one that popped to mind. In the BBC Sherlock, there's John and Sherlock is out here insulting people and offending people and putting folks at risk without really thinking that part through or being worried because he's so confident in his own abilities. And meanwhile, John has to kind of walk behind him and soothe ruffled egos and put people at ease after they have been upset and sort of fix things in Sherlock's wake, because Sherlock just cannot be bothered to deal with silly, petty human things like emotion. And I just don't want that to happen. And I don't think it's going to, based on the final scene with her and Elliot, because she is talking about like having some grief sex with Josh, and then immediately realizes that she's talking to Elliot, who like just lost somebody that he was low-key in love with. And she apologizes and says that that came out way harsher than she meant. And I mean, Margot doesn't apologize. That's something that right in this episode, Josh mentions that she is not good at apologizing. So getting to see her do that, and, you know, that moment of softness and vulnerability from her, that's character growth. And I'm hopeful that will continue, and that, you know, she will keep on sort of making her own strides forward without Josh having to be constantly like reminding her or looking out for her, or, you know, being a sort of buffer between her and other people. But honestly, as much as like I say, I wouldn't want that to be the nature of their relationship, I will say it is so often a male character and a female character who is cleaning up after the male character, and the male character being an asshole and the woman being the one that sort of like mitigates everything. So even though I really hope that's not what they do, it would still be a nice change for it to be Margot being the one that's constantly like trampling over everybody, and for Josh, her boyfriend, to be, you know, it's funny when you start to see things and realize that is often a male role and not really realize it. I was just covering Golden Hand, which is a book by Garth Nix that's part of the Abhorsen series. And there is this incredibly stubborn fisherwoman who refuses to go back into shore, even though it's super dangerous, because she doesn't have her hold full of fish yet. And she is written in such a way with this like unbending ego and unreasonable attitude that for me, I was just like, it's really surprising that she's not written as a man, because that's just, she feels so male in the way that she just puts her own very narrow idea of what needs to happen ahead of everything else. And then somebody in the chat even mentioned, like, they came in late after I had said that myself, and they were like, doesn't she seem like she should be a guy? And it's really interesting how we associate, and it's not that there aren't women out there with that sort of attitude. Of course there are, but we are so used to seeing certain personality types depicted by dudes that when it's a woman, it's just can throw you off completely and make you realize like, oh, I have no idea what to expect from a character like this who isn't male. And also it was, somebody shared a tweet that the actress sent out saying that when she, plays Margot, a lot of the time she is trying to channel Samuel L. Jackson. And that makes a lot of sense, honestly, with the way some of her lines are delivered and whatnot. But anyway, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but this whole thing with Margot, her acting when they finally like take out Elliot too is so good, because it's, you know, this complete panic and it feels really, really real. But okay, let's see. Oh, we have the scene, I forgot about this, with Katie and Zelda. And Katie is very, very angry. Rightfully. 100% rightfully. I had a little bit of irritation in this scene because I felt what Zelda was doing. And she says this here, because Katie basically, I'm gonna just read actually what she says as she is sitting down. Zelda says, hello, Katie. She says, how are you, Zelda? Zelda says, I understand what you're feeling. And Katie says, no, or she says, I understand that you're angry. And Katie says, that would require actual human feelings. You piece of shit, pearl clutching, sociopathic. And Zelda interrupts and says, none of this was calculated on my part. I have believed in Everett's goodness for over a century. Katie says, Everett is in it for Everett. And Zelda's response is, if you are right, then all the death, all of it, is on my hands. And I really did not care for this bit of the script, because what this felt like to me is, and in my experience, obviously, it's with dudes, but I'm sure women also do this. It felt like when you get in an argument with somebody over something very, very valid, and rather than take responsibility for the thing that you are pointing out, they handle you by going, "You're right. God, I'm such a fuck up. I fuck everything up. I don't even know why you stay with me. I ruin everything. Just go. You should just leave me. You could do better." That's what that felt like to me, is Zelda being like, well, if you're going to lay any of the blame at my feet, then you're laying all the blame at my feet and saying that I'm responsible for all of it. And do you really think that's true? And does that seem fair? There's a real manipulation here that I'm not even sure was intended by the script, but it felt that way to me. And I hated the fact that Katie sort of caves, because we have her sort of stop and say, to Zelda, she says, "I know you're not evil. You are just the definition of obedience." And the thing is, you cannot be evil, but also fucking take responsibility for the way that you ignored all the evidence. She just really was so, in my opinion, willfully obtuse about some things. There was a naivety there that for somebody who has been alive for over a century, I cannot excuse. You gotta fucking wise up a little bit, lady, So yeah, I just didn't love that Katie immediately sort of walks it back and is like, well, I'm not saying you're evil. And I just was like, don't feel like you have to soften things for her, So anyway, let's see, where do we go next? Oh, okay. So we get Josh and Quentin talking about what they're going to do about Elliot and trying to figure out a way that they can save him without killing him. And they're in the middle of debating what that would even look like when suddenly the monster shows up. And the two of them are standing there unsure what to do as the monster approaches them asking, "Where is my sister? And where is the scroll?" And Josh says, "What does the scroll look like again?" as he unrolls it and it opens the portal and the two of them jump through it. And then Dean Fogg is right behind Elliot. So this is my question here, because I didn't quite... This has to be a full-on setup, right? They figured out exactly how they were going to play this, because Dean Fogg would never just be there otherwise. But did we see them set this up? Or was that sort of meant to be a surprise? I'm feeling like I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything and that this was supposed to be something that came as a shock to the audience as well. And the dean, because Elliot turns around and says, "I don't like you, do I?" And the dean says, "I have no idea, but I can assure you that you will hate me." And then casts a bit of magic at him that causes him to suddenly drop into, I think, the forest of Fillory, or maybe he's at the forest outside of Breakbills. I'm not even totally sure where it is that he winds up. Michael says, "I assumed it was a coincidence." Ashley says, "I was under the impression that it was an accident." Oh. Okay. It's sort of... If that's just a coincidence, it's a hell of a... that really helped them out. I mean, can it be? I don't know. Well, we'll get back to that. So Josh and Quentin go like through this fucking tunnel to the palace of the old god, which looks like a terrible fucking like real estate office from 1994. And this dude who greets them is insufferable. Oh my God, he's so annoying. This like congratulations banner drops, and apparently there is this whole like series of tasks. He says task 764 is the one who usually trips your kind up. So obviously he thinks that they were like taking part in this enormous multi-step mission. And the two of them just happened to get this scroll by accident. And he realizes pretty quickly that when he's making jokes, the two of them do not know what he is talking about. And when Josh says, we just want to speak to one of the old gods, he says, to put this in perspective, that is like a chihuahua demanding a blowjob from an archangel, which that is vivid. That gets the point across. I will not lie. I get it. And so they sort of begin to run things by him and explain what's going on. And his emphasis is pretty much on the fact that like the gods do not want to be bothered and are not worried. But if they are able to take care of this without the gods having to do anything, probably the way to handle them is to drop the two bottles in the seam. And of course, Josh and Quentin are like, okay, can you just like kind of translate that so that we know what the fuck you're talking about? And he explains that there is our world, and then there's like the anti-world, and then there is a leak that created a sort of like pocket dimension where everything is all fucked up and backward, and the seam is in there. And if they throw whatever it is into that seam, it will never come out again. Now, I will reiterate what I said earlier this episode, which is I do not trust that this particular dude knows what he's talking about. I want to, and I assume for sure that he knows far more than Quentin or Josh about things in general. But he seems so uninterested and so like half-hearted about his participation in their conversation that it really makes me wonder how much he was even listening. And if he is like, how many things have been thrown in the seam? Do we have a guaranteed set of like experiments that we can point to with controls to indicate that they definitely will not come back up out of there? I just don't see these two sort of agents of chaos of this level being sidelined, and that taking, you know, that actually being the way they go out of the show. I feel like they have to be back, but I don't know what that looks like. And all right, so we have the whole setup with all of the crew talking about how they need, in order for the binding of these gods in these bottles, they need to all do a magical working at the same time, like worldwide, because otherwise they used the supercharged magic of the reservoir to lock up the first one in a bottle. But the second one from Elliot, they did not have the juice left to do it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that when they go to bring Julia down to the reservoir, it is empty because Everett came and took it all. So Everett's out here fucking wandering around with his fucking godlike powers. Ugh, I am disgusted. I wonder if that reservoir refills when he gets eliminated, because the way that he dies, you know, his body basically dissipates into nothing, into ash, it almost looks like. So I'm wondering, like, what happens to the magic that he imbibed? Does it just get stuck in this mirror world, never to be returned to Earth? Or is it... I don't know. But so yeah, they don't have the juice that they intended to use from the reservoir to lock up the second one. So they have to organize this like worldwide hedge witch cooperative in order to do it. And we have a cute moment. And I will say, as much as I don't care about the two of them together particularly, I did like this moment between Alice and Quentin where he doesn't want her to go, she doesn't want him to go, and they both like kind of come to the realization that being a team is when they are at their best, and that they should work together, and neither of them should try and keep the other one away the way that they normally do. And she's in the middle of saying this to him. She says, "So it's decided." And Margot walks by and says, "Okay, people, let's do this. If you need to touch butts, make it quick. We've got a multiverse to save." And Alice says to Quentin, "How does she know our thing?" And I think that part of why I didn't care about them that much was because we didn't get more moments like this. Because Quentin gives her this smile when she makes that joke. And I said this while I was watching it. Quentin is so much hotter this season. And I think a lot of that is because first of all, they cut his hair, which thank fucking God. But second of all, they are letting him be a little bit more, I don't even want to say they're letting him be more happy, even though that is part of it. But they're giving him more to do emotionally in general. And so seeing this like smile that he gives her is honestly really, really sexy. Like that grin. I was just like, there was a moment of me being like, oh, damn. And then Alice laughs and giggles a little bit in a really sweet, genuine way that we just don't get from Alice. Alice is always busy being anxious. She's always busy being sad and tortured about something. And like, look, I get it, okay? But like, it's so boring. It gets really boring after a while. So getting to see them interact like a couple, enjoying being in each other's company for a second, liking one another, I think this is really what I needed more of in order to get invested. And it's tough with this show because there's not a lot of time. This is a really, really fast moving show plot-wise. So they don't want to, take moments to let people be happy a lot. And I'm not saying that the show would be better if they did necessarily. I just feel like these relationships might become more important to me than they tend to be. But anyway, so the poor monster, and I say the poor monster, even though he has murdered so many people, because we have this moment of him in the woods. I'm not even sure what woods he's in. Like I said, I think it's Fillory, but it might not be. But he seems to be like sort of unable to go anywhere. Like he can't travel again after being hit with this. He is sitting there monologuing to himself. And he's saying, like talking to his sister in a way, "There's something I want you to know, sister. This world, it's not just the bad things. Or the ones who wronged us. There is beauty in everything, even in the silences, especially in the silences or in the quiet." And we saw a shadow of this when he was talking to his sister after bringing her back. This monster is getting a little bit attached to Earth and growing to care a little bit in a way that it had not. And I wonder how much of that is like truly happening to it as a being, and how much of it is like a result of residing in the same human body for a long time, or what, who knows. But there is a feeling to this scene of this monster beginning to maybe turn a corner. The thing is that under the influence of his sister, it's really hard to know if he could ever sustain that, because he seems to be very susceptible to her judgment about him. So they roll this eyeball, Margot's eyeball, and sneak up on him, do a bit of a distraction, and then Margot nails him with the axe, and he goes down, and they capture his essence. And honestly, I gotta be honest, you guys, I wasn't entirely sure that these axes were like gonna work properly, because the whole thing with the way that Margot gets the axes, that was not like a legitimate possession in the way that she thought. So I was sort of like, well, I will accept if they work the way she expects, because it needs to happen for the plot. But if I were Margot, I'd be a little bit less sure of these doing what I want them to do for this. But this is when they get Elliot the hell out and to the hospital. And I really, really loved when Margot is like yelling at the doctor that, she needs to save him, yada, yada, yada. And the doctor has dealt already with Penny yelling at her to like fix Julia. Like she didn't think of that. And she says to Margot, "We don't have the magic to do it that way, but I used to be a trauma surgeon. I am more than capable of fixing him the old-fashioned way. If you need to cry, go outside." And I fucking loved that moment so much, because when she says that to Margot, Margot stops dead. And it was just this moment of like, I really felt as if Margot heard her like speaking to her in the same way that Margot would have spoken to somebody in that situation. And immediately was like, okay, you know what? Like, it was just from one bitch to another. I hear you. You are right. Also, I can't believe you just called me out for crying, which is not what I fucking do. And I am, and I can't believe this. I need to go pull my ass together. That whole bit I just really, really enjoyed. And Elliot, it seems, is gonna be okay. He's walking with a cane, but he's back and he is all right. So I dealt pretty much with the aftermath of Quentin's death, but I didn't really talk about how it goes down. They go into the mirror world, and there is this one door that Alice has felt for a minute, even when she was a Niffin, she should not open. And they figure out that the seam is behind that door. And it's honestly really cool looking. I thought that the design of the seam was very spooky and just kind of ineffable in a way that works really well. So they toss the first bottle in there, and it just sort of like, disappears. And just as they are about to toss the next one in, Everett comes in and is like, "Hey, yo, that bottle's mine." And I gotta be honest, you guys, I was a little bit confused about what Everett wanted that bottle for again. Is he going to try and absorb the power of that god? Or was he going to try and like get information out of that god? I forgot somewhere along the line what he even wanted this for. Because he was the one that was telling Zelda that he needed to become a god in order to stop these two. And now they've been stopped, but he's getting in the way and still trying to make this claim that he isn't going to be like the gods that Quentin has met. He will be better. He will be different. But I just don't like the whole, you already absorbed apparently all of the power of that fucking reservoir. What more do you fucking want, dude? Ashley says, I think he was planning to absorb the power. Michael says the magic from the reservoir is just a one-time thing. Oh, okay. I did not realize that. I thought that was like, battery type dealy. Okay. Noted. So they're reminder in the mirror world where they can't practice magic because it is really dangerous and shit goes very haywire. And Quentin is about to just throw that thing into the seam anyway. And Everett breaks the mirror in a pretty dope moment, actually, because I didn't even realize that it could break like that. And Quentin, as we learned last episode, his speciality is minor mendings. And behind his back, he does a mending on the mirror, which he shouldn't do because that's super dangerous. And chucks the bottle at it before it's even quite finished mending itself. So we get this really awesome slow-mo of him and Everett each sort of trying to beat the other to the mirror, and the magic that Quentin has cast going haywire, and the slow light passing along the broken pieces of glass within the mirror. All of this is done really slowly, and it's pretty cool looking. And I thought that it was a really nice capture of this drama of this moment. I really liked it. And also, this is all like a sort of black and white. And so the light of the mirror magic and the shooting of the sort of what looks like sparks coming out of the mirror now that he has cast the spell, it looks really, really wild. And it starts to bounce around. I would love to know who designed this last moment with this magic going haywire and bouncing around, because it looks so cool. It really, really does. And we see Everett just, kind of become ash and disappear. And Quentin is running to the door, and he also begins to explode into ash. And I was like, oh, they're doing it like this. And then we have him in the underworld. And I love Penny when he says, it's been a while. And then the camera turns and it's Quentin. And Quentin says, oh, shit. Really? That is a great reaction to realizing you're dead. That makes sense to me. So, yeah, I really liked this episode. I thought that this was a really, really good finale. They were ballsy. They did some cool, visual stuff with it. There is a lot of potential character-wise for a lot of growth. It's really amazing to see how far this show has come since the first season, because y'all know, the finale of the first season, I was just like, what are we doing? Seriously? I got so angry. And it's really a testament to how good television can be as a medium for the translation of books versus movies, to watch how they decided that they were going to take control of this material and do something very different than what the author had done. And maybe with the author, if I read them, I don't know what my reaction would be. But I know that Julia's rape was part of the original story, and that a lot of what has happened in seasons 2 through 4 are not from the books. So I'd be real curious about comparing and contrasting the events. But I think they've done an amazing job at pulling it out and making this more interesting and building on these characters. And I don't know. I'm impressed and I'm hopeful. One season left, and it's the last season of the show entirely, right? That was the finale season that just aired. So I'm very eager to see what they do with it. And there is just a lot that they can do. Austin says, what about the fillet reveal? Oh, Fillory. Oh, I forgot about that. Thank you, Austin. I forgot all about that. I talked about Margot and Elliot growing as people, but I forgot about the fact that they round the corner and the Fillorian castle looks totally different. And I was like, does that look bigger? What happened to that? And it turns out that it's been 300 years. And Josh is gone And I don't know what happened to Fen, because she didn't come to Earth with Josh, did she? I don't remember what they did with Fen. So it's been a minute, which is kind of a cool thing to do, because that was the thing with Narnia, that time pass is really fucking weird there. And they would go home for like, summer break and then go back to Narnia, and it had been like, 600 years or something. So yeah, we'll see what happens here, but we have like the return of the old kings, and there is some dark king who is apparently like ruling now, and we don't know who it is. So R.I.P. Josh the Fresh Prince. Indeed, Austin. Indeed. So yeah, I hope that Fen's okay, that like she somehow went somewhere and isn't, dead of old age or something at this point, but who knows? So, all right, I'm over time. I better wrap. But thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. And thank you to Michael for commissioning it as a voyeur episode. That was pretty fun. And also I know Melanie watched it with me, and she had not seen the final episode either. So that was fun to do with somebody. I hope that you guys enjoyed the coverage, and I'll be seeing you again pretty soon, I think. Let me just double check actually before I go when the next episode for The Magicians is, because I think people started commissioning season 5. Let's see, what is today? The 27th? Yeah, so season 5 episode 1 is on June 19th, so it's almost a month from now. And then episode 2 of season 5 is on July 21st, so there's over a month between episodes 1 and 2, and those are the only episodes of season 5 that have been commissioned. So I am well into August now, in terms of bookings. So, for the first few episodes, there's going to be a month between them. So guys, be prepared for that. But if you all are interested in finishing up season 5, you're going to want to get on that, because I am going to be going on my honeymoon in early November, or I'm going to be going on my honeymoon in late November, but I'm going to be like starting to take time off to deal with wedding stuff mid-November. So I am going to have much, much less availability from November and almost none at all in December, because I'm taking most of that month off. So just to prepare you all for difficulties in finding slots in those months, just want to let you know. All right, I'm really done this time. Thank you again, and I will be seeing you all again in a month with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.